Startup Speaker Series. Thanks for joining us as always. As per usual, we have a phenomenal founder here today that I will introduce shortly. But a reminder about how these events work. The goal is to get your questions answered. So I've got a few questions I'm going to ask Kati. We'll dive in from there, but you know, a third of the way through or so, I'm going to start calling on you for your questions. We want to make sure we hear the things you want to learn about. So without further ado, let me introduce a very good friend and mentor of mine, Kati Walcott, founder of a company called IBM. So let's give her a round of applause. Kati, I think the easiest way to start, knowing that you are a deeply technical founder with insane genius and the like, tell us a bit about...
Yeah, don't believe everything he says.
Everything I say. Let's maybe the best place to start is like this problem you've seen in the world, and then we can dive into what IBM's doing to solve it.
Sounds good. So a little bit about myself. I'm actually a UC Davis graduate. A couple years barely before you were born, just maybe a couple. Studied molecular genetics, although I spent a lot of time in this building because I was the TA for the PhD computer science lab, but I was in letters and science, never mind, long story. So I have 25 years, or well, 22 years of background at IBM. I was a systems engineer working on things like cloud computing and defining some of the Linux functionalities that you're using. And then I had 11 years at Intel as a senior principal engineer fellow, focusing on chipset architecture all the way up to cloud computing and a bunch of other stuff around IoT and disaggregated rack. So I'm actually a computer engineer. After I finished here, I went back to Sac State and got my engineering degree and then went on to a master's and other education. I was working at Intel starting around 2016 or so. I started working in the Internet of Things organization, and I started looking at data. And when you think about computer science, there are some fundamental pillars of computer science, and one of the fundamental pillar is data. You know, outside of compute, storage, transport, you know, those basic things that you do in order to manipulate data and drive it up from, you know, structured, unstructured data into information. Now, when I started looking at that technology is when I decided that, or started looking at data is when I decided that we needed to define a new way to manage data. Because when you're thinking about you existing in the physical world, your data actually exists in the digital world. And you probably have heard of a concept of digital twins. You actually have a digital twin. And that digital twin is probably unknown to you because you're not keeping track of your name, your social security number, you know, your phone that we probably all have is collecting information right now as we speak and sending it to data brokers. And there's data brokers are sending it to AI companies, and they're making millions and billions of dollars off of you. So back when I was in the IoT days, I realized that every physical device that you have around you is collecting data. From your Samsung TV to some internet-connected refrigerator, to your car, to your phone, to your laptop, to the cameras in this building are all collecting. I know everybody's like, oh wow, yeah, there's a camera there, there's a camera there, and these are all gonna be uploading information that are going to be digested by different systems that is going to be defining the fact that you and I are in this room having this conversation, and somehow that information is going to be relevant and valuable to somebody else. So how much money do you think, you know, if you use Facebook, and I know I'm going to age myself because every once in a while I do, but let's say Facebook, TikTok, how much money do you think Facebook and TikTok make off of you per year? Wild guess. $500, $1,000, $25,000. Average user, $33,000 a year is how much money Facebook believes is your value on their platform.
Like one individual person.
One individual. So are you getting any money out of that? No, probably because you are signing away your rights at the moment you hit that submit or agree button that says, oh, I never read through those 5,700 pages worth of legal documentation that says these are the things that I am agreeing to do as a user of this platform, right? When you think about signing up for TikTok, has anybody actually read the terms and agreement for the user license? I have. I don't think anybody else has. But the reason I have, because I built a neural net in order to figure out whether or not I actually agree with those terms and conditions. And I have to tell you, I do not. So your Apple iPhone, or the Apple phone, your iPhone, has about 7,000 pages of terms and agreement. If you really, really start looking through the terms and agreements and you go through all the links, parsing that out and actually make it into human readable and understandable is virtually impossible. But if you read through the terms and conditions, which by the way my attorney calls it a license of adhesion, because it's glued to you but not to Apple. So it's managing your behavior but not Apple's behavior. The terms and agreements essentially says that they will sell your data and they're gonna make money off of that. I don't know if any of you have a car that you purchased or your parents purchased giving you in the last 5 years. It's maybe about 5 years old. Do you have vehicles like that? That information that vehicle is collecting from you is being sold to LexisNexis, who's selling it to your insurance company. So if you stop too fast, you're driving erratically, you accelerate too fast because you had, you got a D plus on a midterm and you decide that, you're upset about the outcome of your midterm and you accelerate too fast, that accelerometer data is actually flowing through LexisNexis, through your vehicle to LexisNexis, to your insurance company. So maybe the next insurance cost to you is going to be much higher. So why do you actually care about all this? Because there are two worlds that we exist in. There is this physical world where you have agency, that laptop is yours, that iPad is yours, that camera is yours, and you have the ability to prove that it is yours. If you go to somebody else's car and you want to take it, you are essentially stopped by legal consequences, physical deterrence, and probably your moral feeling that, what I'm doing is wrong, right? So you're not going to go and steal somebody's vehicle. But in the digital world, there are no such laws and regulations. Although there are regulatory agencies and there are laws that are put in place, like California's Consumer Privacy Act, or the international GPRS regulations, right? So these are regulations that manage your digital rights and digital data and your digital agency and your digital assets. But they don't have teeth because you don't have the ability to gain agency and gain ownership rights over your data because you have given it away at the moment you hit the submit button, right? So when I was working at Intel, and I started looking at where data goes and how data is being used, I realized that there is this fundamental inequality between data producers who are collecting and constructing data about you and you. And I needed to find a way to fix it. So I left Intel April of last year and I formed my own company. And that company is called IBM Enterprises. And last year I had 4 other friends of mine, 2 Intel and 2 non-Intel, who joined with me and decided that we are going to form this company in order to create technologies that allow you as individuals to create ownership and manage your own data as an asset, to give you the same rights and privileges in the digital world as you have against your same physical items, your shoes, your earring, your laptop, your pen. These are things that you have physical ownership of, and you need to have the same type of digital ownership over your data because it is actually valuable and it could be valuable to you. And most importantly, when you look at, I'm going to just maybe take a little segue, when you look at, and I talk to my financial advisor about every 6 months or so, and as I'm looking at my portfolio, one of the interesting things that he started to forecast to me maybe about 2 years ago is that as you look at companies that are creating physical goods and generating revenue out of physical goods that they create, there was about maybe 8, 10 years ago, there started getting this line that says they are also creating digital goods and creating revenue out of digital goods. Who do you think is the raw material for that digital goods economy? Anyone? Who's the raw material that is creating you? You are the raw material creator. It's not silicon and it's not oil. It is not wood. It is not, not sand, not dirt, not, bauxite or iron ore. You are the raw asset in the digital economy. And unlike when you dig bauxite or iron ore out of the ground, in order to pay and purchase that raw material and pay somebody that is digging that up, nobody's paying you. So what I had to start with in my company is, what is that basic foundational change I have to drive in order to give you the ability to own your data? And that's what the company is about. So what we started with is this notion of data is free. And today, data is free, right? So if data is openly accessible, unlike your vehicle, to which you have your title and there are laws protecting your data, protecting your vehicle for somebody else not to take it, there are no such protections on data, and there is no ability to protect it because its nature is to be open. So what is the difference between open data and a secure vehicle, right? It's the pink slip and the title. Open data doesn't have title, right? So how do I do that? So I had to create this ability to title data. Okay, well, there are things that you may have heard of, like blockchain that does titling through hashes. I don't know how many of you are familiar with blockchain. But essentially it's a general ledger that gives you the ability to create a hash on the data in order to title and put that information on an open ledger, and everybody knows that you have title. Okay, but the big issue with blockchain is that you don't actually physically protect the data. So how do I physically protect the data? Well, what does your key does to your vehicle? Your key to your vehicle denies access, right? You lock your vehicle unless you have some really purposeful individual that really, really wants to get in there and finds a brick and breaks through a window and gets in your vehicle. You essentially thwarted their ability to get in. You are essentially denying them access. So this is the fundamental premise that I started my company on. How do I make sure that data is denying access? Because if I deny access and I title it, now I can prove it's mine. And if somebody else wants to use it, they have to talk to me in order to gain access to it. At which point I can tell them, hey, these are my rules. So if you want to use it, then you have to sign my license agreement. And if you want to use it, and I believe it's valuable, then you have to pay for it. Now, this is going to create some opposing reactions from large companies that they believe data is free and data should be accessible and data doesn't have any value unless it's their value, right? I mean, this is going to change some of the things, and there's some drivers here that we have to drive in society. And I'm not alone on this, by the way. So I started this company and I started down on this journey. And I have no funding. I mean, I have some of my funding that I poured into the company in order to start it up, and all of my funding is going to developers because they are the most valuable commodity at this point. They are the ones who are essentially instantiating what we are building. But as I started going out, one of the first things that I had to deal with is, okay, I have cool tech, but how do I tell a story that brings an investor on board and makes my story interesting? So in the initial phases, I actually started from what I call the wide approach to a narrow approach. So the wide approach, I started going out with to investors saying, look, I need to have the ability to represent individuals in the digital space. I need to give them sovereignty, I need to give them agency, I need to give them legal protections and things like that. And philosophically, they agree. But that philosophy doesn't translate to money, right? It doesn't translate to, if I give you money, how much money are you going to give back to me and how quickly, right? I needed to narrow that down. So coming in and having a conversation with investors on philosophy is bringing them on as, on the concept, but it doesn't actually give them the tangible thing that they need in order to invest. So what I had to do is figure out and narrow down very, very quickly to the simplest one common denominator element that is part of this overall picture, but gives them something tangible, something that I can monetize and sell, so that when they're giving me money, they're expecting a 5 to 10x return. So for every dollar that they are giving me, they are expecting $50 back, right? Because as part of the exit strategy that I had to define, they are expecting that when they come in and the company is valued at $1 million because they put $1 million in, then when they exit, the company is going to be worth $50 million, and they're going to be able to get a significant amount of money back out of their investment, right? So I had to be able to prove that shift. So the second thing is that I come in, I believe I have a really, really cool technology. I created something that I call a DAC. It's a digital agency capsule. It's this little portable little enclave technology. And I'm probably using terminologies that you're not familiar with. Think about this as a protective sphere over your data. And it doesn't matter where your data goes, it's protected and it's always connected to you. That is my lowest common denominator. And the value that I can bring to you and all the consumers is that no matter where this data goes, if you want to have access to it as a third party, you will have to contact me in order to get the key, and the key is only temporal. So the key expires, and when the natural state of this thing is to be closed. So now when we are talking about investors, they have a widget. They can actually almost touch the concept and be able to focus down from this big concept down to the narrow specific thing that is palpable to them. They understand that this is the thing I want to buy. Now I had to figure out, okay, well, is there anybody else that's doing this? Because they want to know who else is competitive or who else may be thinking the same way. How many of you think that if somebody is doing the same thing as you are, is that good or bad? If there's competition out there that's doing the same thing as you are, from an investor's perspective, is that a good thing or a bad thing? It's actually very good. You're absolutely right. Many people that I speak with say, no, I mean, my stuff is so unique. Nobody has ever thought about it. Well, okay, but somebody must be dealing with the same problem, because if you're not looking at the same problem and they're not on board, then you may not have a solution that has any marketable value. So you actually want to have competitors that are dealing with the same problem. What you need to make sure is that there's a difference, there's a market difference between your thing and the way you solve the problem, and their thing and the way they solve the problem. So for me, that big difference was in blockchain. I don't need it. Blockchain is cool, but blockchain is just a ledger, and it's essentially keeping track of your luggage tag as your luggage goes from New York to San Francisco, but doesn't actually care about the content in your luggage. So if somebody steals your shoes out of your luggage, you would never know. The hash would remain the same, and you would still get the luggage point A to point B without your shoes, but you would never know somebody stole it and when it happened and who happened, who has your shoes. With my technology, you would. So I can put my technology on blockchain, or I don't really need it. But I can integrate with blockchain just fine. So, hey, there is a competitive differentiator. Here, all these other companies are trying to solve the same problem, but they're doing it their way. I am doing it in my way. And by the way, this is differentiated. Now, what's really, really cool about this is that there are different things that you can sell to investors, and they get different value out of different things. Because I have a differentiated product and I can pinpoint the specific unique things, I can patent it. Because it has a unique capability that does not exist in the industry. And when somebody looks at the valuation of the company as an investor, one of the things that they look at is your IP portfolio. And I have 122 patents right now. I filed another 30 of them this year. They are still in the process of being evaluated with the patent office, so I'm not counting them yet. But these are all describing the different aspects of unique capabilities around my technology. And when an investor looks at it, they say, okay, when I invest money, it's going to be risky. And that risk has to be offset somewhere because they do their own actuarial calculations just like an insurance company does, right? They want to make sure that whatever money that they're investing in, they have a good way to insure it. And what is the due diligence that they do? They're going to make sure that the people that are in the company have some solid basis. You know, they are actually the right people in the company, and they have the right skills and background and capabilities. So they are doing that due diligence. They are doing the due diligence on your tech. They're doing their due diligence on your IP. And even if nothing else, part of the negotiation could be, if you don't actually have this thing built, I do, but we're going to get there in a minute. So even if you don't have this thing built, they're going to say, hey, you know what, but they have 30 patents. And that patent already has value because they could, as part of the negotiation, say, you know, I'm going to give you $10 million, but I want to have insurance collateral, your IP. Okay, you have to make a decision whether or not you want to do that. Because if you fail, you're going to give them back the IP, which they can sell, and then they can recoup their money. But it gives them the ability to make a decision whether or not they want to give you more money or less, right? They may give you $1 million if you're not willing to, you know, put your IP up as a collateral. They may give you $10 million if you put your IP up as collateral. So depends on what your goal is. So now I have, you know, the big idea, I have the small idea, I have a unique idea, I've done the competitive, I have, you know, a intellectual property, I'm protecting it. Now I have to figure out how am I going to sell it and who am I going to sell it to. So now you have to do a little bit of marketing, which is like totally not my forte. I'm an engineer, I'm a geneticist, I don't do marketing. But as a founder of a small company, you have to put on all sorts of hats. So, you know, I've done my marketing back, you know, I've learned as much marketing as I can, and I'm still terrible at it, but I can do the research. So I would do and start looking at, okay, what, you know, out of this thing that I built, if I go and have a conversation with a customer, say, I can protect your data and you can monetize it. Most customers that I'm talking to with glaze over, it's like, what the heck are you talking about? How am I going to connect what you're saying with what my problems are? So the first thing I have to do is define and identify the markets that I'm going after. Who are those people that have an acute problem that I can solve with the solution, and how do I apply my features and functions into a marketable, needed thing? So what I decided to do is go after the music and entertainment industry. Because musicians and creators and digital creators create a ton of data in this economy, and they are physically here, and only a small portion of them fit within YouTube's current terms and conditions, which, by the way, change on an hourly basis. So I built an AI that's constantly looking at it. But it's a terms and conditions, and if you fit in these terms and conditions, which is your place to operate, then you're gonna be able to maybe monetize if the following metrics are met, right? And that's how you get money. So, but in the middle of all this, there are a lot of other creators, and every one of you are creators if you really think about the data that you're creating right now that somebody's stealing from you. These creators are in the middle of trying to make a living out of digital creation, whether or not they're making art, whether or not making music, whether or not making videos, whatever digital content, even NFTs, right? They are trying to create digital content and sell it. And that is how they make money. That's how they are paying for their childcare, buying food, you know, put a roof over their head, you know, buying gas. So how do I give them the ability to prove that this asset is theirs? And how do I give them the ability to monetize that and improve the ability to get paid? So now I'm able to connect my thingy to some value. So now I actually have to move into that market. And this is where I build, and you have to think about who are your advisors? Because there are core people in your organization, but then you need credibility and people that actually understand what the heck you're talking about. So I'm like, okay, do I know anybody in the music industry? I've attended a couple of concerts, but I don't know if anybody's going to talk to me. I love Metallica, but I have no way to talk to them. So what I did is I approached a couple of people that had kind of a foot in technology and music. And I brought in a gentleman named Larry Twiskin. He's a 4-time Grammy winner musician, wrote music for the Beach Boys and a number of other big artists. So I brought him as an advisor and gave him a stake in my company. So I gave him a certain amount of stock and said, hey, I need your help to enter into this industry. So now I have letters of agreement with Pink Floyd, letters of agreement with the Stone Temple Pilots, letters of agreement with the Beach Boys, letters of agreement with Johansson, what's her first name? Scarlett Johansson. I have letters of agreement with artists who are trying to protect their image and likeness. There are some companies, in fact, we signed the agreement before Pink Floyd sold their music collections for $400 million. I have relationship with Scott Page, who is one of the musicians he played saxophone from Pink Floyd, who is in the middle of selling his Golden Mullet NFT that he put on the moon. And he just sold it for $1 million. And what I can do is actually protect that asset. So I'm enabling them to do that. Also, I am working with the Stone Temple Pilots, one of the Stone Temple Pilots, who started up an organization called Song Hub. So one of the problems that they're solving is that if you as a musician create music and that music is being played 100,000 times on Spotify, there are different artists that are part of that group who are adding song content to that song that is being sold. And somehow they need to be able to prove that this artist added drum solo, this artist added a guitar solo, this artist sang, right? And these 3 things, along with 5 other things, became part of that song, and this song is viral on Spotify. Right now, Spotify is paying the record label. But the record label, there are copyright elements, there's a bunch of other legal things that you have to prove in order to say this drum solo that I did on this day is part of this song, therefore 1/10 of that song and that revenue should be coming back to me. There's no proof. So all of a sudden, these large record companies and media producers are getting billions of dollars of money that they are not distributing back to the licensees. So the individual artists are starving, the record companies and record labels are making billions of dollars, and there is this gap in between the two that within 36 months you have to prove how many times it has been played, what portion is yours, in order for us to direct the money to you, and you have to prove through copyright, very, very strict proof levels, that this particular data is yours. I have a solution for that. So now what I've done is now I have, through this relationship with this advisor, I've entered into a market that I personally know nothing about. He helped me make the connection and identify the opportunity space where I am connecting a real world problem to a real set of capabilities. So now I can actually prove my capability in situ. I can put it in place and actually prove how I'm changing what these guys need in order for them to get paid. That's exactly what we're in the middle of. And we're going to be announcing this at Bedazzle, which is that's like a digital artist event in Miami in the middle of December. So, but this is how the process just went, right? I went from this big idea down to this thing, down to a customer, through an advisor. So I had to figure out all of these different elements and do all the homework and wear a sales hat and a marketing hat in the middle of that. So now we get to, what does the investor still need from me, right? Because we have some investments, but we still need more money, right? I have a very, very expensive group of people I'm working with. So I have engineers, I got developers, I got marketing, I got sales, I got legal, I got all of these expenses, and I have to pay these people, and I have to pay the medical, and I have to pay insurance, and I have to insure myself because the investors want me to be insured in order for them to invest in me because I am the brains behind the whole thing. I'm the chief technology officer. So all of the intellectual property that I'm creating is extremely valuable, and if I decide to run under a bus, by accident, then they want to make sure that somehow they get paid, right? So I had to get all of that infrastructure in place. So they wanted me to show that I got a thing, it's valuable, I have patents, somebody wants it, somebody's using it. I have a letter of intent of use, I have an actual customer signed for use. They are actually using it, and then they want to actually talk to the customer and say, are you actually getting value out of what Kati just said? So these are all of the steps in order to structure what I do and how I do it and where I do it and with whom I'm doing it in order for an investor to take interest in me, right? And I have to go through this whole song and dance every time I'm talking to a different investor because they don't even want to talk to each other. But I have to tell you, once you have the first investor on hook, people are starting to come. So now that we have a first investor on board, we have other investors that are coming out of the woodwork and being interested because they're saying, hey, somebody took a chance on this guy, on these folks, and felt that when they went through the actuarial and the risk calculation, there was a risk and reward that was balanced enough to make sense. So now other investors are coming in and saying, hey, okay, there's a balanced picture, right? So that's kind of where we are right now.
So, Kati, I'm running through my list of questions here. I don't think you missed the one I was going to ask. So we've got about 15 minutes left. I'd say we go straight to student questions. Just let them raise their hand.
Absolutely.
And
And just feel free to ask whatever's on your mind. I will do my best to answer. And if not, I don't have an answer. Maybe one of my team member does, and we can get on the phone and I can make them answer.
Perfect. Yeah. What do we got? We'll go
Yes.
here in the back.
You started this April last year?
Yes.
Whoa, that's wow. But I also have a question. So have you ever thought of, instead of having the consumer pay for using the protection, having the consumer have the protection, and if companies want to access their data, they have to pay?
You perfectly described how my financial plan currently works. Thank you very much. Maybe I need to hire him. But yes, actually, you're absolutely right. One of the things that we are giving back is agency. So you creating your protection is free. In fact, I'm planning on making it open source. So open source, you will be able to get to GitHub. In fact, I will license the IP to be open source, and that's part of my business plan. The ability, the fuel, so to speak, will be coming from whoever wants to use it. So if Google wants to use it, then you will set the price and they will have to pay. Where I get paid is in the relationship and that little transaction, like Visa does, how I'm going to connect so that the transaction is coherent and I can maintain that connection to the user so that they behave in a way that you expect. So that is where my little bit comes off. And otherwise, the actual creation of this encapsulation for your data is totally free.
So just one question.
Yeah.
So if this comes open source and everybody can start using it, is there capacity to do it? Is there enough way to store everybody's or protect everybody?
You store your own stuff. I'm not storing it for you.
Oh, wow.
It's this is just like a file. So so you're gonna take a song, you're gonna take an MP3, you're gonna put it into this. It's gonna look just like an MP3, except it's in a fully homomorphically encrypted container.
Wow. Thank you.
You're welcome. Very good question, and I love where you went with that. Great job.
Yeah, question here and then move over there.
Yeah.
I was wondering, what are your most important next steps for the next 2 years? What are your plans?
So the biggest things is the relationship with investors is a continuous relationship, right? So because they are part of our board, or they will be part of our board, because our current investors are all friends and family. We don't have an institutional or a VC investor yet. But once the VCs are on board, they will become part of our board of directors, and they want to make sure that they have a good exit plan. So I need to drive to an exit plan, and in the middle of that, I have to drive to major milestones.
So I have to be laser focused on delivering on what I agreed to and complete them earlier than promised. I always try to do that, so I always plan a little bit further out. But make sure that I hit all my milestones. So I actually have a product plan all the way out to Q3 of 26. So my focus is execution and bringing in the right resources with the right quality and the right qualifications in order to be able to execute. And beyond that, I want to move into different industries. I want to give this ability and go beyond the entertainment industry and move into healthcare. I would love to give you the ability for you to never, ever, ever get another letter from UC Davis Health or Sutter or Kaiser that says your data was compromised. What I want to do is give them the ability to safeguard your data, so even when it's stolen, because it will be stolen, nobody can do anything with that, and essentially kneecap the side of the world whose job is to steal your data, because they can monetize it and they can hold you hostage with whatever's in it. So if I am successful in the next 2 or 3 years, you will never in your life get another data breach notice, because the technology will be there to eliminate them. Yes, sir.
So you mentioned earlier some of these contracts that people have sort of implicitly or explicitly signed, like say with Facebook, you know,
Mhm.
in the terms and conditions, check the box. I guess my question is, how entrenched are some of those contracts that people sign day to day? And if I started like using your products to protect my data today, would I be able to just kind of refresh everything, or are certain things more difficult to deal with? Because say like you buy a car and you sign some paperwork there, and suddenly your data is available for like the next
Mhm.
week or so. I guess how does it work with different timelines for different agreements that you have?
So, I don't know if everybody heard the question, but the question is around contracts of adhesion and this user license agreement that you have already signed. Our intention is not to change that. Our intention is to protect your asset so that the data that you are allowing them to have is the one you choose to leave open. Whatever data that you're not allowing them to have, you close. So Facebook would be starved of data. In fact, I don't know how many of you are familiar with TikTok and what's happening in the federal government right now. Under TikTok, ByteDance is very, very tightly integrated. And because of that, the US government is actually in the middle of eliminating TikTok from the US market, because ByteDance, which is a AI engine underneath, is stealing American data. It is stealing your data and giving it to China. So because of that, the US government is talking about eliminating access to TikTok altogether. It is actually a national security issue. So one of the things that they are talking to is there's a gentleman that used to own I think his name is Tim Draper. I don't know if his name is Tim Draper, but he used to own the Dodgers. He's running Project Liberty right now. He is actually trying to purchase TikTok, and we are in conversations with them because you cannot separate ByteDance out of TikTok, but with my technology, I can starve it of data, so that AI would be dumb as a doornail without content. And all I'm doing is creating a kind of an intermediate layer that DAGifies your content, so when ByteDance get it, they have no way to do anything with it. I'm going to starve it of content, so the AI is going to die. So at that point, they will be able to separate it. Now, whether or not this is actually going to come to fruition, TikTok has to be purchased, and whether or not that's going to occur and Tim's going to do it or not, I don't know. But very, very good question, because the only way to deal with the user license agreement and this contract of adhesion problem is to leave it alone and to change the game, right? And to change a game, the control point is in you. It's not abdicated to the third party. Okay, here.
If you were to make it open source, how would you market it? And then would VCs, do you think they would be okay with it being open source and you just taking the top line, or do you think they would think that's like a loss of revenue?
Very good question. So I don't know if you're familiar with the saying, free speech versus free beer. It's the Open Source Foundation's motto. So open source is free speech. Red Hat and Linux is open source, but people are monetizing it, right? Because it's not free beer. So just because you have access to it doesn't mean that just because you have access to the source code doesn't mean that the binary that is implemented in a product is not monetizable. So philosophically speaking, I want to give you the function in order for you to have the choice to protect your data. Where the money is in your ability to see where it went and who's using it. Well, or it is your choice just to keep it on your laptop and protect all your data and never send it to anyone, okay? Where I am not giving up source control is in the viewership and the transaction. So what I want is flood the world with your ability to protect. What I want to be part of is the economy that is connecting your asset and your value with somebody else who wants it. That's where the money is. It's not actually in the giving away that protection. That protection should be your innate right to begin with. So in order to create an equitable digital data asset economy or digital economy, you need to be part of it and you're not. So I have to create that initial step. So actually the investors are on board. But very good question, thank you. And I'm sorry, there was a question back here.
So I guess I have just a more general question
Yeah.
about data, but like for example, what kinds of data is TikTok collecting, and then like why is that valuable to China?
So when we started this conversation, I mentioned to them, or mentioned to you, this concept of a digital twin, okay? It is extremely valuable for somebody to understand who you are, who you're sitting next to, where you have been, how long you were at that particular location. This is all personal identifiable metadata. Telemetry on how fast you're walking, you know, whether or not you went to the grocery store and you picked up bananas, or you're eating some, you know, peppermint patties, and that's what your purchase decision is. Because these are all part of the ability to manipulate you into a behavior that is constructive and beneficial for China. And by the way, China, pulling in China is a bad example, but it's China and Russia and Brazil and Korea and all the other, you know, different organizations, even Israel, right? I mean, Pakistan and everyone are part of this global, we want to manipulate others in order for them to be favorable to what we want. That manipulation is occurring constantly. It's you know, down to the point where you walk into a grocery store, and at the grocery store they put the bread about the time when you are going to be in there, anywhere between 3 and 5, they are putting the fresh bread right by the entrance so that you buy one, right? I mean, that smell is immediately going to invoke the fact that you want fresh bread, right? They are manipulating, and they are trying to create an ability to manipulate in order to achieve whatever their own end is. And I know, I mean, the US government is doing the same thing. So it's not that China is bad, it is just that particular example in TikTok, that's what's going on. So they're collecting everything as much as they can, and they're creating relationships and a contextual picture of who you are. Yes, ma'am.
So you did talk about how many patents you said you had, like over 100, you created 30 this year. Can you talk more about your process in creating them?
Sure. So the question is how do I go about patents? This was an interesting question when I was presenting when I was at Intel. Somebody in the audience asked me the same question, and just about right here there was a senior level executive looking at me and intently waiting for me to answer, and I told him, looking right at him, I said, I cannot invent here at this building. So where I invent and where my thinking comes from is either when I'm running, or I'm playing soccer, or I'm hiking, I'm in the shower, or sitting on the loo, right? I mean, you kind of have to be in your own little mind space in order to create. But the way that I go about creation is I identify a problem, and in this case, my problem was, you know, how do I give you agency and ownership over your data, and how do I eliminate access to others? And what I do in the way that I create patents is that I give myself a space to operate and think about that problem broadly. And as I think through that, I start asking questions, and I kind of stick that in the middle. And then once I have enough questions around what I need to solve, I come back out and I start adding additional solutions or potential answers or elements of an answers around that. And then I start honing it down. So as I come to that creation, I start, solving the problem. And then I look at, and you need to have some amount of background, or you talk to, and I do talk to others. In fact, from previous meetings, I still work with some of the students who have some ideas, and we're working through whether or not it's truly unique. Just because you have a way to solve a problem may be that the way you're solving it is not unique, or what you're solving is not unique, but the way you're solving it is unique. And you need to come back with an answer that is unique and uniquely solved and a unique problem, and the two have to kind of coalesce into one. After you have done that, you actually have to expand it, and you have to do some due diligence on something called prior art. So you need to actually do some due diligence to see if somebody else has invented something like that. And just because they have invented something doesn't necessarily mean that yours is not inventive. You just have to alter the way you explain it in order for that invention of yours to be totally unique. So how many of you invented the wheel? Probably nobody, but did you know that the wheel that was used on the moon rover was actually patented? So the moon rover wheel, even though the wheel was invented a long time ago, is so unique because it's a rigid, open mesh of chain. It's a chain mesh that allows the moon dust to actually come out of the wheel, so that it's lightweight and allows the vehicle to go on top. So it was reinvention of the wheel, right? But the other thing is you need to think about your patents being very, very simple, because they have to be examinable and they have to be usable. So people think that patents, the only patent that's good is if it's totally secret. There are some patents like that, and we usually call them, secret patents, that they're part of the top secret, platform or company-specific IP that you never actually patent. But most patents, the way you want to write them is for them to be discoverable. You want others to want to read it, and you want others to want to use it, right? So what is one of the most valuable patents in the world? And you guys use it probably on every device that you have in your hands, is the invention of the cursor. That little arrow that you're pushing around? That little arrow that you're pushing around has a value of about $8 billion to IBM Corporation. That's a patent that everybody has to license in order for you to use whatever device that you're using. So that was nothing more, just the invention of that little arrow that you can move around, and the way it's tracking and the way it's moving and how it's connecting to the device. It's very, very simple, very, very discoverable. So there's a lot more into patenting, and we can go into it and maybe even do a seminar, but there are things like international patents, US patents, there are provisional patents, non-provisional patents, there are product patents or method patents. We can go through that, apparatus patents. And I can tell you everything I know. And then if you want to know more, the chief legal officer that's on my team is the second best IP attorneys in the United States. So he would be very happy to actually hold just an IP seminar for you guys if that's what you want. So.
Okay, Kati, we've got about 10 seconds. So
10
I
seconds.
always like to conclude with what does it mean to you to be able to tell the world you're a founder? Why is that important to you?
So it's important to me because I want to tell you this is not an easy journey, but it is well worth it, because it gives me that comfort and that ability to really, really do something that is near and dear to my heart. I'm sorry, I just touched that, made it sound awful. But I want to change some things. I want to do something that is going to be the right thing for you guys and the right thing for the next generation. And I believe I have the ability to change some things. And as a founder, I actually have the support of people, support of organizations, support of founders and VCs in order to make that change. And that to me is one of the biggest gifts that I have. And the fact that you guys sat through an hour of me rambling is just, I'm thankful. So I really appreciate your time, and I'm here to ask questions. I can stay around a little bit longer if you have some one-on-one questions. But I appreciate your time today, and please keep in touch. I'm on LinkedIn.
Let's give
And-
Kati Walcott a round of applause.
And if you guys keep in touch, when the product comes, is fully in market, I will give you free DAX. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.